1 second later, the storm took everything. The sky was calm just moments before the chaos began, painted with soft streaks of orange and gold as the sun lowered itself toward the horizon. Families gathered on porches, children played in the streets, and fishermen returned with their day's catch. No one could have imagined that this peaceful evening would be their last taste of normalcy. Because 1 second later, the storm appeared on the horizon like a beast awakening from slumber, because with it came a darkness that swallowed hope itself. The wind was the first sign that something was wrong. It carried a strange howl, unlike anything nature had produced before, more like the scream of 1,000 unseen voices warning of destruction. Doors rattled, trees bent unnaturally, and a chill swept through the streets that made people drop everything they were doing. The dogs barked, birds vanished into the clouds, and the oceans began to churn as if something enormous had disturbed its depths. 1 second later, the storm grew teeth and began to bite. People scrambled. But no amount of running could outrun the giant wall of chaos that followed. Roofs peeled off like paper, windows exploded outward as if fleeing their frames, and cars were tossed around like toys. Mothers clutched children, fathers screamed out names into the roar. But the storm silenced everything with its violent voice. In the blink of an eye, what once felt like a safe world had been transformed into a nightmare where survival was not guaranteed. The ocean rose higher than ever before, as though the sea itself had been angered and wanted to reclaim everything humanity had built. Entire neighborhoods were swallowed in minutes. Streets that had been alive with laughter now lay beneath black waters that carried debris, memories, and voices of despair. Boats crashed into homes, waves climbed onto buildings, and the storm ruled like a merciless king demanding tribute. Electric towers collapsed, plunging towns into absolute darkness. The only light left was the terrifying flashes of lightning that split the sky, each strike revealing the destruction below like snapshots of horror. In those moments of white brilliance, faces twisted in fear appeared, only to vanish again into pitch-black nothingness. 1 second later, the storm stole light, sound, and even the sense of time itself. Those who sought shelter thought walls would protect them. But the storm had no respect for human design. Concrete cracked, iron bent, and wood shattered. Families huddled together in basements, whispering prayers, hearing only the screams of wind above them and the pounding of their own hearts. Every second felt like an eternity. And every new roar of the storm reminded them that safety was just an illusion. High above, planes attempting to escape were thrown around like helpless birds. Pilots fought controls. But nature refused to be tamed. Radios crackled with final words. Then fell silent as aircraft disappeared into the swirling abyss. It was as though the storm not only wanted the ground but also claimed the skies, leaving no space untouched. Animals fled in all directions. Horses broke free of stables, stampeding blindly into the chaos. Packs of dogs howled together before being scattered by the winds. Even the wild creatures of the forest, usually masters of survival, were helpless. Birds were plucked from the air, fish washed ashore, and predators and prey alike perished under the same merciless hand. The storm did not discriminate, it took the rich and the poor, the old and the young, the strong and the weak. Mansions and huts alike crumbled under its fury. Technology failed, communication lines snapped. And for the first time in centuries, humanity felt completely powerless. 1 second later, civilization itself looked fragile, like sandcastles swept away by a ruthless tide. In the aftermath of each strike, silence fell. But not the kind of silence that brings peace. It was the silence of loss, of people realizing that the things they once clung to, possessions, homes, even loved ones, were gone. Cries echoed through ruined streets, broken by the sound of collapsing structures and the endless rainfall hammering down like punishment. Children clung to parents, not understanding why their world had turned into a nightmare. Their eyes searched for explanations, but none were offered. The adults had no words, only tears and trembling hands. In that moment, innocence was shattered. And generations would carry the memory of a storm that showed no mercy. Days later, when the skies finally cleared, what remained looked nothing like the world people had known. Cities were skeletons, forests flattened, rivers poisoned with salt and debris. Survivors stumbled through ruins like ghosts, searching for faces they would never see again. The storm had taken not just things, but the very identity of places, erasing history in minutes. News spread of entire regions wiped clean, as though they had never existed. Maps became outdated overnight. Places once marked with names were now nothing more than scars on the earth, reminders of how easily nature could rewrite everything. Humanity had thought itself powerful. But the storm had written the final lesson in wind and water: you own nothing. And yet, within the destruction, sparks of humanity remained. Neighbors carried strangers on their backs, doctors worked by candlelight, and hands reached out to save those trapped beneath rubble. The storm had taken everything. But it also revealed the best and worst in people, stripping away pride and leaving only raw survival and compassion. Governments struggled to respond. But aid was too little, too late. Roads no longer existed, airports were gone. And ships could not reach the broken shores. Survivors began building with whatever they could salvage, forming new communities out of ruins. The storm had destroyed their homes, but it could not destroy the instinct to rebuild. Scientists warned that this storm was not an accident, but a warning. Climate shifts, greed, and arrogance had fueled the monster that had arrived. Humanity had built its own executioner, and the storm was only the first of many. Fear spread faster than hope. But somewhere in the chaos, lessons began to grow. Children who had seen the storm would never forget. They carried stories of survival, of watching the sea devour streets, of lightning splitting the sky. These memories turned into determination, shaping a generation that promised never to ignore the warnings again. The storm had taken everything, but it had also given them a new fire, the will to protect what was left. Years later, survivors would still whisper about that night. They would speak of the second when everything changed, when nature reminded humanity that it was never in control. The words 1 second later became a haunting reminder etched in history, a phrase passed down like a scar from one generation to the next. And so the world moved forward, scarred but alive. The storm had taken everything. But it had also given humanity a chance to rethink, to rebuild. But to respect the forces greater than itself. It was no longer just a storm in the sky, it was a storm inside the soul of humanity, reshaping the way the world would live forever.